Hey, good people. Grits or cream of wheat? Who the hell is racist? Does anyone ever ask if they touch your hair?
Black Like Me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Black Like Me.
Hey, Black Like Me family. What a week. Listen, I want to let you know we broke 3 podcast download records last week. And so I'm just excited that people all over are finding out about Black Like Me. And so if you've been telling your friends, you must have been. Thank you. Keep it up. When you listen to something exciting, retweet it or post it out. Or listen, we got a bunch. What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, like 10 new patron supporters. Like, this is crazy. This is the most we've ever gotten in a week. So I got to shout them out because they're at that level. So I want to remind folks, if you become a patron and support us at $6 a month or more, we shout your name out. So I want to thank JC Anderson from Long Beach, California, Catherine Butts, Michael Pinkert, Aaron Jennings, Ashley McNary, Heartland Church of Sun Prairie. This is our first church supporter of Black Like Me, Roxanne Dockman, Anne-Marie Shank, Sheila Colopy, and Sarah Lowe Olson. Thank you for your support, because it is a vote of confidence and it helps us to improve this great work that we're doing. Today's episode is similar to the one we downloaded last week, because I had this Facebook Live experience with a former police officer who's Black. He's currently the interim director of security and safety at Verona Area School District. That's a school district outside of Madison, Wisconsin. But as a former Madison police officer, we talked a little bit about what police reform looks like. And you are going to find this very intriguing to hear this from a Black gentleman who's a former officer. So please listen to this, lean in, share it. If you've not yet done so, subscribe to the podcast. If it's on Apple Store, iTunes, come on. Subscribe there. You can go to alexg.com. Subscribe to my website, because it allows you to know when I post new videos, because I'm not just doing podcasts, but I'm doing other things to communicate what's going on. So I want you to be able to do that as well. And please somehow tweet out and let your friends know that you're supporting Black Like Me. Listening to it is one thing, but when you tell your friends that you're supporting it, it makes them want to listen. So please don't just listen, but help to share the information, share the love. But I just wanted to thank my patron supporters. Thank you so much. And for the others who are listeners, subscribe, consider becoming a patron as well. But let this information transform you and become an agent of change in our society that we so desperately need. All right? You're going to enjoy this episode. Hey, good people. I want to welcome you to what has become my new thing, Black Like Me Live. Now, those of you who have followed Black Like Me podcast for, say, about the last 100 episodes, you know that we record during the week, usually on Wednesdays. We drop on Tuesdays. But a few weeks ago, I said, there are too many things that are happening in our world. And this is pre-George Floyd, that there are times I just need to bring people in so we can begin to talk about what's really going on. And this is no different. So I just wanted to welcome you to our live event on Thursday nights. For the past few weeks, we've been doing 6:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. shows, Central Standard Time. So I'm glad that you all are tuning in. Let your friends know. I'm giving the room just a chance to populate a little bit more. But I'm really happy to have a special guest on today. His name is Corey Saffold. And Mr. Saffold is the Interim Director of Safety and Security for the Verona Area School District, a former Madison police officer for close to 10 years. Was it about 10 years, Mr. Saffold?
A little over 10 years, yeah.
A little over 10 years. He serves on the Office of School Safety Advisory Council for the Department of Justice, a musician, a producer. Listen, if you like the intro and the outro for Black Like Me, this guy was my producer. for that. So if you kind of bounce to it, I got to tell you, Mr. Saffold, someone has asked me where they could hear the rest of the song. So I actually want to write it. You can put all the jingle, all the special sounds, but I want to write the lyrics. And
Go
so,
ahead.
Mr. Saffold, welcome to Black Like Me Live. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. It's good to be
Good,
here.
man. Good. You know, I don't do the Black Icebreakers on the air because that takes too long, but I do have a question that I ask my guests. If you could be white for one day, what is the first thing you do? Bam.
Ooh, I could be white for a day. I never thought about that one. I just haven't ever looked forward to being white for a day. I don't know. I don't know what I would do if I could be white for a day. That's not something that I would ever think is exciting. Not no diss. I'm just saying, like.
No. Oh my goodness, that's funny. Oh man. Oh, that's funny, Corey. So no, man, that's really good. So we're gonna be talking about a number of things, man. We're gonna be talking about policing and stuff like this. Hey, Don. Don is my producer, but tonight he's also my executive assistant. Don, can you come on the air for just a minute?
Certainly.
Mr. Thornton, how are you doing tonight?
I am doing wonderful. How about you?
Good. Hey, how long have you been white?
I made the choice very early on, and I have gone through periods where I've regretted it ever since.
Just tell folks what you saw. You live on the west side, and you just saw a parade of how many cars doing what outside your house?
Honestly, I don't know. I was sitting here. I was just about ready to log on with y'all, and all of a sudden there's all these horns going on, and I'm like, what in the world is going on? So I stepped outside. I live on Midvale, and stepped outside, and the first thing I see are two police cars, and the next thing I see are several cars with American flags, and I'm starting to feel a little nervous about what I'm actually looking at. And then I realized very quickly that every single car is decked out, a lot of them with flags, but every single one with Black Lives Matter, with very supportive signage. They obviously had spent a ton of time getting their cars ready, and there were 200 or 300 cars at least. It went on for like 7 or 8 minutes. It was just amazing.
Interesting. Well, you know, people are just trying to do something to show their solidarity, and I appreciate that. So I want to see the footage of that. I might use that at some point, but thank you for capturing that, and thanks for producing.
I think it should be up on my Facebook page, but I'll share it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Man, so we live in a wild time, Corey. So we've been knowing each other, man. Corey, how long have we known each other?
Has to be about 20, 21 years, something like that. What is this? 20,
that's half your adult life. That's almost half my adult life.
It is, yeah.
Man. And so I remember when you joined the police department, I was at your swearing in. You did that faithfully, served our community, and I appreciate that. You know, my little brother's a police officer in Chicago, so you know that I appreciate people that are serving my community. But you know, we got to talk about some stuff that's going on. But can I show a video before we get started?
Sure.
I was it's just a gentleman that just sang a song, just to express how he's feeling. A young African-American artist about what's happening in the U.S. around all this brutality. And I'm just trying to get more viewing on it because I just think it's powerful. It's called "We Need More." It's only about 4 minutes. Then you and I would jump into our conversation after this.
Sounds good.
I know you're a musician, so I knew you would you'd appreciate this. Can you hear it now?
Yep.
Little black boys don't go to stores or use their pockets anymore. Can someone tell them what they're living for? They want more. Oh, Breonna Taylor, I bet your sleep felt so peaceful and pure. Oh, Breonna Taylor, the peace was ended by police burglars. Walk the streets alone at night. They turn their cameras on when they see white. And little black girls don't open doors or stand near windows anymore. Can someone tell them what they're living for? We need more. We need Little black boys and girls are scared. Their parents feel so unprepared. The world sees black no matter what you wear. So little black boys and girls don't cry. We'll fight to find an alibi so you can go outside and never die. We will try. We will try. We will try. We will try. We will try to run outside. Try to close our eyes. Try to walk the streets and never die. We will try to open doors. Try to go to stores. We'll try to find life. We're living for. We need more. We need more. We need more.
Man, that was Taylor Fagans out of Manhattan. I saw that in a sort of a gathering that I was a part of and speaking at early this week, and it just touched me because he just used such an artistic way to do this. And so Corey, I know we're checking in a little bit, and I know I've got a lot of friends calling me. I know brothers are calling me, just like, man, how you living? How you doing? How you hanging in there? And so, I won't even ask you to kind of go into all of that stuff. But I guess, and you're still in law enforcement, you're still in safety and security, but you spent 10 years serving the community, putting your life on the line every day. Did you ever think that there would be a day where policing and police brutality would be such a front and center discussion in our nation and in the world like it is right now?
No, I didn't actually. At the time when I applied, there was always that contention between police and the community, that I was aware of, that many of us are aware of. Our parents and our grandparents taught us how to respond to police whenever we got pulled over or whenever we got stopped. But it's one of those things where, I've been a police officer for 10 years, and it's like the one thing that's changed even before I became a police officer is technology, just kind of exposing a lot of this. But I still never thought that in the face of being exposed, it would still get worse. Like,
right.
When you think of exposure, and you think of, shedding light on something that will then cause a change, but it hasn't. It hasn't, and it's like,
has it gotten bolder? Have they gotten bolder with it?
That's what it's looking like when you see a lot of the recent killings going on. It seems like it has. It's unbelievable. And so, no, I never thought it would get like it is now, with just how, like you said, bold and in your face these killings are happening. I mean, that video of George Floyd is just ingrained in all of our memory, and that was just a very bold, just arrogant, just matter of fact kind of I don't know what the officer did. So now, to answer your question, I never thought it would get like this.
Man, how shocked are you that other officers were standing around? No, understanding your training as a former police officer, you've been at this for 10 years, have been at that for 10 years. Is that par for the course? Like, what was your reaction when you found out that there were other sworn-in law officers who watched that happening, that unnecessary use of force?
You know, because at first when you see the video, when I saw the video, before I saw the other angle, all I saw was the one officer that was standing there kind of acting as security. I didn't even realize there were two more there. So I think it was additional anger, mainly because we have this thing in policing called officer override. Officer override is basically when, you know, you feel that officer is going too far and you do what's called an officer override. You place your hand on their shoulder. You kind of, and you can, you know, if you don't want to, you could do it in a discreet way, but you do something to say, hey, you're going too far, and something needs to be, you know, move your knee down, get your knee off of them. Like, I mean, you know, you do something to address the situation, even as an officer. And they teach you in the academy to do what's called this officer override, to step in. But I will say that when it comes down to, you know, the police culture, the older officers, seniority is everything. Seniority plays, and what I mean by that is that you do have a lot of officers, particularly those ones that have been on the force for years, that have a huge level of influence in any given situations, where you might have some officer that may be afraid to step in, or you know, there's this hand called officer safety, where you can get labeled officer safety. What that basically means is that your fellow officers consider you a safety risk because of whatever stance you took or however you approach the situation. So you might approach the situation to de-escalate it, while another officer likes to approach a situation where he wants to escalate things, and he may consider himself more tactically sound, or whatever that may be. And because you want to de-escalate, then he calls you in officer safety risk. And basically what that means is it's the way that officer labels another police officer, so that all of the officers know on a department, oh, this officer is going to be a problem. He's in officer safety, or she's in officer safety. You know, watch out when you're going to call with them because they're in officer safety. That's
a real thing. Officer safety risk.
That was my experience.
It means you soft, like they soft on it, like don't watch out for them. They can get you shot, or are they a buzzkill, or
not necessarily don't watch out for them. I mean, I don't think it prevented officers from helping you, but it was just a label that was placed on you just because you go about things differently, and more start low and then work your way up approach rather than start high, you know, where you don't have anything else to go. Just for those officers like myself, let's start low, use my verbal skills to talk. You know, it's a reason why I've never been in a fight while a police officer, because I know how to de-escalate and talk. But if I go into a situation where some officers feel like you got to go in hot, you got to go in high, and I don't feel that way, then I'm labeled officer safety. And that doesn't mean that they're going to not help me, but it just means they're going to, if I go on a call with one officer, they might call a couple more officers to come with me because they feel like I'm an officer safety. So they want, you know, additional help, or just a bad label, a bad rep.
Yeah. And why is it an officer safety risk? Who's the officer? Are you a safety risk to the other officers, or a safety risk to yourself?
So to the other officers. So for example,
that's bad.
Yeah. And so what happens is you get labeled this. You get labeled this on the police. I got labeled this on the police department because I went to a call with a young lady, and when I approached the call, I did not feel that we had to approach that aggressively, mainly because I knew the young lady that we were.
Okay.
So that's why I believe
community policing.
Exactly. I could use my verbal skills to de-escalate and things like that. And, you know, there was another officer that thought differently. And this other officer was like, you know, this officer with this reputation that she was going places, going to be something in the department. And so, but kept saying that over and over. Oh, he's an officer safety risk. Oh, this, oh, that, oh, this, oh, that. All because I wanted to go and talk to this young lady versus coming in and tackling her, And so I think that's completely wrong. And so that was a long way to answer your question, is that there may be other departments that have that similar type of culture where officers, may not want to be labeled that way or are reluctant to act because of that. Now, with that being said, you got to get over it. You got to get over it, and you got to do what's right. But then there's come times when, if you're the only officer and you're outnumbered as an officer, how do you step in that way? So to answer your question, part of me, was hurt that the officers didn't help. Part of me understands from a sense that there's a certain culture on police departments that if you don't break that culture, if you don't break that mold, that way of thinking that shapes the culture, that's going to continue to happen. Mm-hmm. And, we can talk more about what that looks like in terms of breaking that culture, but that will continue to happen if you don't stop it there. And it's definitely a culture in the system.
Talk to me about that culture. I like the end of system. Talk to me a little bit about that. And how long did it take for you to be able to identify that existed? Help people out here who are civilians not understand systems and certainly not understand wearing a badge. So what does that culture look like?
So again, the culture. So first of all, let's talk about when you're a new officer. When you're on probation, or maybe the first 1 or 2 years in policing, when you're just learning the ropes, all right, and you enter this environment, you enter this culture where things are just done a certain way, and it's not always, necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, or I shouldn't even say it like that. It's not necessarily always one particular officer, but more like a system. And so things are done a certain way within this system. And within that system, there's training, there's practices, that current practices that we do and that we follow, and we're trained that, and we're drilled on that until times like these, when they start to finally try to focus on de-escalation and things like that. So what I mean is that if you are, responding to a call and you got certain information, and everybody goes in hot in that call, but me hearing the subject's name from that call and realizing that I know this person from when I was a school police officer, used to be a former student, so I had a rapport. Me wanting to approach the situation from a very low level to talk and reason my way into getting her to acquiesce to whatever it was we wanted her to do, that's very against the culture and against the grain of what was embedded in us often. Now, mind you, this was toward the end of my career with MPD, so I was very comfortable with, at this point, doing what I knew what was the right thing to do, and go against, defy that culture of policing. But that's not always the case for some officers, especially younger officers, and that takes time. And so while I was perfectly fine with going against the grain, most of the other officers was doing it by, current practices. This is how we approach, this is what we do. And that's just what it is. And it's like, until you break that particular culture, which is, like I said, isn't necessarily a particular person, but a system, a systemic culture, and the way things are done and the way policing happens.
And that's helpful. That's really helpful, because I think we don't have the language for that as civilians, but we feel like that's going on. Someone just shared a question from the website. It just says, how can policy address something so informal as officers' safety risk? Because it's so toxic. So what policies, what can be in place to address that?
That's a very good question and a very hard question, because it is very it's difficult, because how do you create policy that addresses a culture in a system that, for something that's not necessarily illegal or not necessarily against policy or against procedure, but there's something that's just done. This is just something that just happens. So I don't know, because at least when I was in policing, and I don't have all bad things to say about policing. We'll get into some other stuff later, but this is just what it is right now.
Right.
At least when I was policing, it was very easy to get a label placed on you. And these labels, they stick with you. They stick with you for the duration of your.
Is it written in your file? Is it written in your file?
No, it's not written. It's not written in my. It's not written in my file. The reason it came up because I was in the process of promoting for a detective, and they do this thing called peer reviews. And one of the peer reviews, this particular officer that I'm talking about, that was super, in my opinion, unnecessarily aggressive, and I wasn't. And so this officer's response to that was, "Oh, he's an officer safety risk." Because when you say that, it's like saying, you know how you are trying to explain to a person that you call them crazy, but you just say that so that whoever you're talking to can just completely write them off,
right?
Rather than explaining what the situation is, you say, "Oh, they're crazy." Like you just completely dismiss them. Well, saying that person is an officer safety risk is what
that's dismissive.
Very dismissive. It's the equivalent of that in the world of policing. So to try and answer the question, though, I think that one way you can address that is by addressing any policies or procedures around hiring, because it's my belief that the way you change police culture is by making sure your police department is very aggressive about hiring people of color, people who don't necessarily come from policing backgrounds. And we focus on hiring so many criminal justice majors, and it's just not. There was a study at UW some time ago that focused on like the number of reports that criminal justice major got while they were in school, like alcohol complaints, drugs complaints, and it's higher than the normal college population. And it's not like a diss against all criminal justice majors, but I would like to see more police officers come from backgrounds that don't necessarily represent only criminal justice, but also I'm a big proponent of this life experience. I believe that the more life experience you have, the more that shapes how you police and how you understand and how you use your discretion. So I just think that there needs to be an overhaul in like hiring practices. I don't think that I don't think you should ever have a situation like Ferguson where you have a predominantly white police department policing a predominantly black community. Right. None of the officers live there. They're all drive in. They're looking at that community like those people or animals or things like that. And so I think that not only hiring but promoting. So you change the culture of policing by increasing the number of people to influence that culture that don't necessarily believe in that culture or don't necessarily come from that culture.
They have no investment in it.
Don't have any investment in it. Like all the 10 years that I was a police officer, I didn't hang out with all cop friends. I wasn't always talking cop talk. It just wasn't, it was a great career, and I appreciate every moment of it, and I appreciate everything that I learned from it. But it wasn't my life, and I had other things outside of that. When you get people into policing that don't necessarily come from that culture, and they promote and they continue to promote, and you continue to get more in, they continue to promote, that over time you slowly change the culture of policing, which I think is actually one of the things that during this time we should be focused on. Like, everybody say F the police, and we don't want to be police, and that's your prerogative and your right to free speech and all that good stuff. But in my opinion, as many people as possible, as many black people as possible, should be police officers.
So you think with everything that's going on, you would still say that black people get into policing?
Why not? Well, here's the thing that people don't realize is that there is an extreme amount of discretion in policing. You can literally have an opposite decision made depending on who goes to the call. One officer can go to the call and literally arrest someone and completely change their whole life, and a different officer can go to the call and make a decision to not arrest them. Just off, as long as it's not a felonious offense, there's an extreme amount of discretion in policing. So wouldn't you rather have someone come to your home or your loved one's home who has life experience that relates to their life experience, that understands? And I just firmly believe that we, as the black community and other and white community too, because it's going to take a partnership and organizations and universities to really come together and really handpick a large pool of people that want to get into law enforcement and then groom them to be officers, groom them to not only be officers, groom them to promote to sergeant, to promote to lieutenant, to promote, and then have them apply and then see them all the way through until they keep promoting and keep doing that. Every year we get a pool of people. If every state, every city, and every community did that for their policing, then their police departments will represent the people that live in that community, and you would slowly change police culture.
That's really good, Corey. Listen, man, the questions are coming in, so I'm just going to throw a couple of things out at you, and we can hit these with short answers because I want you to have time to talk more extensively about some insights you have about systemic change. Did becoming an officer a little later in life help you to stand up to some of those peer pressures of the police culture?
Yes and no. So yes, after about 2 years.
2 years, okay.
Is very and it could depend on the department that you're in as well, right? Because if you're in southern city, like Atlanta or Memphis or something, then you have a good number of Black police officers or police officers of color. Whereas, the department I was in, it can be intimidating because you do have those officers that their reputation precedes them, and they're like, the good old boys of the department that, for lack of better words, that, and you, and so if you go on a call, for example, you're a new officer and you got two other officers there, you tend to, especially if it's a call you've never been on, you tend to kind of take your cues.
Yeah, you defer to the seniority.
You defer to the yep, you do, to the seniority. You defer to the experience, and that's not. And it depends. I've been in those situations. I'm not saying that if you're that officer that you stand by and watch somebody be murdered. I'm not saying that would happen. I'm just saying there are a lot of more low level things done by officers that some newer officers may not step in on, just because that culture is so heavy. Yeah, it's so thick. You can't think that you're going to just come in and be this game changer in that situation. I've been on those questionable calls, and there's some that I wish I would have done more, but I can't say for all of them. I told the person you should file a complaint. Now, telling somebody they should file a complaint, actually doing something.
You said that?
Yes. There was a situation where I was on a call. I was brand new, still on probation. And, we were having contact with two African-American men, older men, for drinking, for open intox. And, the way that the officer was interacting with them was just unnecessary. And, it just felt very racist, and it felt very dirty. It felt very ugly, like even for me to observe. And, at one point he had them sit on the ground. And these are these two men that could be my elders or something like that, sitting on the ground. So the officer leaves, he goes to his car, and he starts to write his report or whatever, or write the citations. And they looked at me and they said, "Man, why your partner treating us like this?" And I looked back at them and I said, "Sir, I have no idea. I don't even know why he's treating you like this." And I gave them my card and I said, "You should definitely call and file a complaint." And my name was on that card. I said, if the complaint officer wanted to call me, I could verify your story. But that was my opportunity. I was new, I was on probation, the other officer wasn't around. That was my opportunity to say, file a complaint. But Black people don't file complaints. And no. When I was wronged as a civilian, I didn't. For some reason, that's just something that we
don't even think it's a thing. You don't even think it's a thing.
Yeah, we don't even think it's an option. So, but I felt genuinely bad for them. And I say, call a complaint. And so I've been in those compromising situations where, I wonder what I should do. Now that's early in my career. Now later in my career, you couldn't tell me to like when we went to that on that call where I said the one officer wanted to be aggressive and I didn't. I yelled at the officer like right there on the call, like, "No, we're not gonna."
Wow.
do and so it changes over time as you're an officer, as you get confident in policing.
Somebody else is asking, is the toxic culture of police just a regional, statewide issue, or do you think that's a national problem?
I think it depends on, obviously we're having a lot of national cases involving police and everything, but I try to speak to what I know that I've experienced myself.
I think they're asking the toxic just nature of policing, not necessarily police officers bad, but like you talked about this toxic culture. Is that just in places where it's predominantly white, or is that culture pervasive? Do you see some of that same culture if it's an all black force?
I don't know. I've never. So I would say it's per department.
Okay.
Per department is the best answer I could come up to, instead of just calling it just this blanket like national things. I do think there are some really good police forces out there that are doing some good things, and so I think it's per department where that culture is strong, and then sometimes it's just per officer. I think sometimes we can have a good police department that an officer does something that makes the entire police department look bad. Okay. So yeah, I would say per department.
Per department. Someone wrote and said, let me see. There's some good questions out here. So who ensures that a fair investigation happens when an officer is reported? So you said to call on those officers. Does a supervisor handle it, or is there a different internal thing that goes on?
So a completely different entity. So
within the department still?
No. So are we talking about? I'm sorry. So I'm thinking about two different things.
I'm sorry. So like if there's a complaint with an officer and a civilian calls in to complain, like those two gentlemen had called in. Sure. Who ensures that an investigation of those actions take place?
Sure, I get you. My apologies. I was thinking about if there's a shooting that happened. That's like an outside agency. But to answer your question, that's internal affairs, and internal affairs is still within that police department.
And they answer to the chief also? They don't answer to some outside, like the Police and Fire Commission?
No, ultimately it's still the chief. It could be the Police and Fire Commission though, because the chief answers to the Police and Fire Commission.
Sure.
So it could be them, but it's still within the police department. I know from my experience with Madison, I can't speak for everybody. The internal affairs, it rotates different sergeants and different lieutenants each year. Okay. And the time that I've been there, I know them to thoroughly investigate a lot of or most of the complaints.
Did they have black officers or officers of color in that internal investigation unit? Do you remember?
Not that I recall. Okay. There very well could have been, though, but not that I recall. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But so it is still within investigating complaints. It is still within the police department. But that's when you pull on your community leaders, the community leaders that sit down and that have these meetings with the chief, like yourself, and other community leaders that actually you line up with them and have them be your ally if you feel like your voice isn't being heard. You contact the Police and Fire Commission, because you can file a complaint directly with the Police and Fire Commission too, though.
Mm-hmm. People can do that. They go directly to it. Gotcha.
You can't go directly to the Police and Fire Commission. So, if you feel like you won't be heard, you can go directly to them.
Someone asked the question, two of the officers charged in the George Floyd homicide were new to their job. And they asked what would happen if they refused to assist the superior officer. We might have addressed that a little bit, but it could be being seen as an officer safety risk or getting tagged as something. You probably touched upon that a little bit.
They could get labeled. I mean, I think the easy thing, like we talked about earlier, and the person asking the question may not have been here, there's this thing called officer override. Officer override is when you're partner with an officer, you see that officer doing something wrong, and you step in to say, hey, man, it could be something as simple as a tap on the shoulder, a little, just get their attention, have them regroup, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't even have to be a lot, but that is taught, at least in the academy I went to, that was taught in officer override. seeing the officer getting emotional or getting in his feelings or whatever the case may be.
You kind of tap out.
Yeah, and you kind of just have them regroup and things like that. Now, that is something that very easily either one of those 3 officers, at least in the George Floyd case, could have done. Could have just I saw a different picture of an officer who had their knee on someone and their partner just moved their knee out the way. And they could have very easily done that. Now, to answer their question, if those 2 officers that were on the ground that you could see from the other angle were newer officers, that could have played a role, because an officer that had his knee he was a veteran. He was not a new officer. Right. And again, those dynamics do come into place when you're a veteran officer. You've been on the force for years, and you got this reputation as being this tough cop, and it's a reputation that everybody else likes. So your superiors, supervisors like that reputation, because it's like, this officer's a go-getter. He gets the job done. We can count on him, things like that. If you're a newer officer, you're going to think twice about an officer override situation. Like I said, that may be changing, in these times, and I hope that is changing. But that's a very real thing, a real block.
Can a civilian do a tap out? Like, if that's going on, can a civilian that's filming it, can they go and tap the officer on the shoulder and say, I got you on film, don't take all of that?
Well, we're seeing today that many civilians are trying to, and we could talk about the civilians that were there like that. Here's the thing. Let's say a civilian did step in and he actually pushed the officer off of George Floyd, and George Floyd lived. What do you think would have happened to that civilian?
They would have been beat down, first of all, and they would have been charged with attacking an officer. Obstructing an officer. Obstructing an officer, resisting, and likely battery to an officer, which would have all been worth it, right? A life would have been preserved, but this situation would have never made national news. George Floyd would have lived. That person would have had a felony record. So I guess my point for saying all this is, and it was a lot of civilians right there too, that's a very difficult thing to say that people would do. A lot of people are making, social media posts now. If I was there, I would have done this. If I was there, I would have done that. Yeah, I don't know about that, because there was out of other places. Yeah, the gentleman that was there, in the post interview that he made, it was, you could see the struggle, and you could see that he really wanted to step in. He really wanted to do something. But how do you police the police? How do you do that? Well, community oversight committee, but in that moment. In that moment, right? Nothing. That's why we film it. And people are saying, well, he filmed it. But we saw Eric Garner. We saw him get choked out. Same thing. Eric Garner case, it was a case what I call contempt of cop, which is basically another way to say police pride. And the officer in Eric Garner case was just very prideful. Like he didn't like the fact that this man was just standing up to him. And because to me, that if I'm that officer, man, addressing this man for the sale of cigarettes or whatever it was, it's a waste of time. Like, and then let's just say he want to do his job and he wants to uphold the law, however minor it may be. It's his job to enforce the law. So let's just say it's fine. He wants to enforce the law. That's fine. But when you have that many officers around and that much time that they had, similar to George Floyd, you can take a step back. It's okay to take a step back and say, okay, why don't you grab his legs? I'll grab his arm. Why don't you come from behind? Okay, you make sure nobody's on his back. You make sure nobody's on his neck. And let's get this person safely apprehended. If you really want to push the issue, I don't know that I would have even pushed the issue, but if you really want to push the issue, what you do. Eric Garner case, they had ample opportunity to take a step back and come up with a better plan other than violate the department policy. And that's where the anger comes from that people have, that these people are violating their department policies and still not being charged. Right. I mean, that's George Floyd's case was charged, but still. Man, I gotta charge. Huh? I would be charged. Yeah, you should. Yes, well, I'd be charged. I'd be right up, right up in the jail if I do something wrong. We know you would. Shantae asks, is there any good, what can be done to support good police officers who want to do the right things when they're early in their career? I think, and let's just point on that for a second. People ask the questions, where are the good officers? Why are the good officers not standing up? And the good officers are doing
phenomenal things every day that you will never hear about. No one heard about me doing historical Black college and university tours with our students at West High School to motivate and inspire them to, to higher education, because that's not going to make the news.
Right. So how do we support you? That's what you're saying. So how do we as a community support the police officers?
Right, I understand that. I just wanted to put that out there for the viewers, that there are many officers there. So I think one of the ways, having these conversations, but I think also just, there's information spreads so fast, and information on social media is so overwhelming, especially the negative information that those of us that use social media we have to also do the same thing when we notice good deeds done by good officers. Share it, tag somebody, post it as much as possible, and then just acknowledging it, like what we're doing right now, or just telling somebody, telling that officer that telling that family member, hey, thank you for your service. I know it's a lot of things going on, a lot of contention right now, and there's some bad cops, but I personally want to thank you. So thank that officer that that's doing good things. Thank them for their service, and then spread their message, spread what they're doing. Go ahead and share that, spread that, so that people
get
who may
the word
not be following, get the word. Let people know. That's one way.
Hi, this is Jeremy Holiday, and I'm one of the editors of the Black Like Me show. And I just want to take a minute now to talk to you a little bit about Patreon. The show that we put together here is the culmination of an effort of a lot of people. And in order to do it, we need your support. We've been working for a while to come up with a Patreon that works well for people. And the levels that existed before, we recently added the $2 level, which is there for you if you like the show and you just want to give a little bit of support. It's cheaper than a cup of coffee. I mean, I don't think you can find a cup of coffee anywhere, or half a cup of coffee for $2. So if you like what you hear on the show and you want to support it, go to patreon.com/blacklikeme and check out the levels to see if one fits for you. Now back to Dr. G.
After your initial training, is there a continuing education for police officers? Like as an officer, I know you went through basic camp, basic training, but then once a year or so, how are officers sharpened?
So we have in-service. In-service is like our continued education. And the thing about in-service though and continued education is that, it's only so much material you can cover during in-service. So whatever the hot topics are during that time, they may try to cover. We have to always do vehicle operations so often, so that has to be like a part of it. So sometimes it might be in service on mental health training. Other times is in service on defense and arrest tactics. Mm-hmm. Other times it varies. I don't think that it's necessarily enough. I think what would be more effective is like increased table talks amongst platoons with the sergeant and his team, because table talks isn't like going through the motions, but when you are playing something out in your mind and talking through it, that helps because it builds that mental muscle memory. So if they can talk about these things as a platoon, that will help go a long way, so that when that officer's in that situation, that conversation will come up in his head. So there's a situation where, okay, if a person becomes combative, what are some ways I can de-escalate? What are some ways I can even just step back from that situation and regroup? It's okay to leave that situation as an officer, regroup, and then revisit. By having those type of discussions with officers to keep it fresh in their head when they respond to calls, I think will go a long way. In terms of more training for today, I think the departments across the country are starting to have de-escalation trainings and trainings on unconscious bias or implicit bias now, a little late in the game. If you ask me, I mean, you and I remember we were going to do a training that got canceled and just never got picked back up.
Right, never got picked back up.
Got canceled due to weather. Now, part of that is because the training sergeant or lieutenant at the time got promoted, and the one that came in that position just never took it on. I don't believe had an interest in taking it on. And because there was no oversight to say, hey, this training was prepared to happen. It's a training on implicit bias, put on by Nehemiah, where we're going to run officers through scenarios to help them. there was no oversight to say we still need this to happen no matter who was promoted out of that position or anything. So that's a good example of just stuff just falling through the cracks. And when you deal with some departments, man, are just, to be honest, is arrogant. And you are this person from the inside, let's say like me, for example, that says, hey, I think this is the idea, we should do this, we should do that, to train our officers as a person of color, as a Black man, I think we should do more of this, we do more of that. And it's just like disregarded. And then you have people come in from the and it's like, who are they to tell us how to be police officers? Again, you got to break that culture. But I think that's a good example of a training that we needed that never happened. So to answer your question, I'm sorry I keep talking for a long time. Table talks are really good. And then having community organizations really ask the questions of what type of trainings those departments are having to better serve the community in that way.
No, that's good. Someone just asked, do you think Madison Police lived up to the reputation of being folks who are about community policing? Or do you think people need to get out in the streets and the communities more? The question was, why Madison Police, why don't they get out in the streets like they do in other cities? And someone says they remember in the 80s how cops used to drive around and give out baseball cards and stuff like that. Was that something that you think people attain to in the policing, or just community policing look and feel different now?
Well, I think one of the main components of that, I know Madison was huge on that for some time with having community policing teams and neighborhood officers. I was a neighborhood officer, so I was constantly in the neighborhood officer for the Penn Park area, Fisher Bear area. I think what happens is numbers. By law, you have to have a certain amount of numbers responding to calls. And what happened is, so Madison had safety education officers that were in, at our middle schools, just educating. It wasn't for any type of policing or anything. Then we had neighborhood officers. We had larger, I'm not with them now, but there were larger community policing team, and they just really had to cut the numbers on that because they just didn't have enough bodies to fill those. Now they had a few large classes that they just hired. Mm-hmm. So hopefully they can get back to that. But that's one of the main things that I loved about policing was parking the car and getting out and walking around the South Side. I know that there was an initiative when he's now one of the assistant chiefs, but Patterson first became the captain of South District. He did start an initiative where he created this log where officers had to get out of their car and make contact with certain businesses and community organizations. For example, Fountain of Life, Nehemiah, and Mount Zion and Wright Middle School were my organizations that I had to get out of my car and go in and speak and talk to people a certain number of times. And there was like a log that the officers had to fill out. Now that was just for the South District. That was just an initiative that then Captain Patterson had put in place for the community. But imagine if you had something like that was put in place, citywide or nationwide, where officers had to get out, talk, meet and greet, things like that, and then it was kept and was tracked.
So they knew they were doing it?
Absolutely.
Have you seen police activity change because of body cams or the use of cell phones? Has that deterred negative activity, in your opinion?
Body cams and cell phones and things like that, in my opinion, actually protect the officer, believe it or not.
How so?
So particularly body cams. So what happens is when people realize that the officer is wearing a body camera, they respond differently. They're not as quick to go against whatever they're doing, in that moment. They're more likely to kind of go along and be cooperative when an officer is wearing a body camera. Now, when it comes down to cell phones, most times that's when a situation has already started, it's already happening. People get out their phone and they're recording the officer. So most times in those situations, it's because the situation is already happening, and it's not like it's changing anything in the situation. What they're doing at that point is protecting themselves from whatever the civilians protecting themselves from whatever is happening at that moment. But particularly body cameras have done more exonerating of officers than it has been of
Interesting.
Getting them in trouble, according to the numbers.
Yeah. Hey, someone said they're just tuned in. They're asking why you hung up your badge. Are you still in law enforcement or protection and safety? You're the interim director of safety and security for the Verona Area School District. So that was an opportunity for a promotion, more responsibility. And so he didn't just turn his way from that. Somebody asked, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
No, a lot of people wonder that, and they're like, why you give up policing, or you're not a police officer, or what happened? No, it wasn't anything bad that happened. It was actually just a great career opportunity with the Verona. What happened is, Verona Area School District began to kind of take note of a lot of the things that I had been doing as a police officer, especially a school police officer. And then other people in the community began to mention my name to them, like Laleta and other people. When this position came open, so they reached out and asked that I compete with the other people who were applying, and I was able to get it. But you're right, it's definitely a great career change, great career opportunity, schedule, everything more professional, a lot more responsibility, staff under me, things like that. So it was a good move.
Good, that's good. You're doing a lot of cool things. I mean, I don't want to get off track, but you were just recently appointed to the Board of Regents for the University of Wisconsin system. So congratulations on that, man. That's fantastic. Did you have positive experiences with police officers as a young boy growing up?
I did. That's what's interesting about this whole thing, and that's kind of where is when I grew up in Milwaukee, I had police contacts, and all of them were positive. With the black officers, with the white officers, and my police contacts wasn't. Some of the contacts was because I was doing wrong, so it wasn't like I was like an angel. It wasn't like it was always a good situation. But there were a lot of the negative contacts I have with police officers didn't happen until I was an adult, and interestingly enough, after I became a police officer and when I wasn't wearing my uniform. So that's the irony of the whole. One of my worst experiences with police was when I was a police officer. So
in town in Madison?
No, it was I was pulled over in Sheboygan.
Okay. Ooh.
Exactly. Because one of those small jurisdictions.
Man. Someone asking a question. I think you'd have some good insight into this. Folks aren't confident that local police departments will really discipline aggressive police officers. And so we're in a magical world. Like if you could be the president of the Association of Police Officers or whatever that governing group is for unions or for that association, how would the governance of the discipline of aggressive officers need to be handled at a state level, more regionally, by outside oversight committee? Where does that change need to come? Because local departments don't seem to be doing that. This guy who killed Floyd had other, accusations, other cases, and someone just let that happen. And we heard that with Kenny too here in Madison, that there were some things that happened with him that was odd before he ended up killing Tony Robinson. So where does that change need to happen for the discipline of aggressive officers? Is that the community? Is it an oversight committee? Is it higher up the ranks to really bring about change? And we know we have to hire differently, but where does that accountability need to really lie?
I think it's a combination of all of those things that you mentioned. So when we talk about community policing a lot, I mean, not community policing, but community oversight or policing the police.
Sure.
I think this question is one of the ways where that can actually happen. So when you say, I think like a community oversight team that includes a city official, but that city official isn't like a city member of like the city police department, but it's a different city official, maybe from a different part or
civil rights or
something like that. And then maybe a state official, a community leader, and then some community members, right? Because it's balanced in that way. It's balanced in the way where it's not going to just be pulled completely by the community or pulled completely by the state or anything, but it's balanced in that way, but it's completely separate from the police department. And the thing about punishing behaviors, or is there's patterns of behaviors that police officers that they see, and you can tell if an officer is off and is going down a road that's going to be detrimental, to somebody's life, or to that officer, or to the department, because there are patterns of behavior that slowly escalate that. So I would say that there are some departments that do a good job of tracking these patterns of behavior, but it's not enough to track them, but it's enough to intercept them before they become, it shouldn't be where an officer has like 5 complaints, 6 complaints, 10 complaints before somebody steps in. Right when it gets around that 3rd complaint in a certain amount of time, then that's when this outside committee of community members, a city official, and a state official, that's when that entity is convened and they meet and say, hey, this is what we're seeing from Officer so-and-so. He's gotten 4 complaints so far. Each complaint has been excessive use of force. Let's talk about this. And so yeah, this question actually is easy to set up a system for to correct, where the community could actually be involved in that. You put that community, that organization together that includes some state officials, some city officials. You create a system of collecting data to be able to track the pattern of officer complaints and officer behavior. And when it hits a certain flag, you convene that committee and then you investigate like that officer.
Corey, that's good, man. That's really good. Somebody said that the city's police ad hoc report calls for such an oversight committee, and the council and the mayor need to make that happen. And so I know that even through Nehemiah, we're actually mobilizing for a letter writing campaign. And so my producer is going to put a link to Dr. Karen Reese on our team. He's going to drop that in the on the Facebook page. So you can write her, you can contact her and say that you want to be a part of this letter writing campaign. You got a son. Would you want him to become a police officer? I think I asked you that when you were in the studio. I just want to see if it's changed. And would you want your son to be a police officer?
I'd rather be a firefighter at this point.
I think you said that last time. Okay. All right. At least you.
I don't get me wrong. I like policing.
Sure.
The only reason I left is just because of a better, in my opinion, career opportunity. I wanted more responsibility. I wanted to really engage with the community more, and I wanted to just be more involved. I wanted opportunities to bridge the gap more, and I just, that just wasn't, happening in the way that I wanted. But I do appreciate, MPD and everything. Sure. And so I want people, to get into policing. Though I do, I know you asked about my son. It's probably, I'm probably saying the opposite of what I said earlier. I mean, if that's something that he desired to do, I would support him in that. But I would definitely sit down with him and really talk to him and teach him about not being influenced by the police culture that has created a lot of the problems that we see today. I've said this earlier, and I said again, like the focus should be to change police culture. The same way we are talking about putting together an oversight committee to deal with some of the punishments of officers that show a pattern of behavior. We should be talking about putting together a committee so that we can recruit high schoolers, Black men and women and people of color to become police officers. And we should be encouraging them to promote in their policing and getting as many of them as possible to become police officers, all for the purpose of changing the culture of policing, freedom and leadership and all of that too.
Sure. Man, talk to me just a minute about tactics that you are trained in and how you subdue people or wrestle them down. Was like I still have that image of the knee on that man's neck, and I want to let you know I have not seen the video because I just don't need that image among others. Was that a violation?
Absolutely.
Of training?
Yeah, that's not a training technique.
That's not a training technique. And so, man, so what's scary is if we didn't have the cameras, he'd be still policing someplace. And he's just so cavalier, man. I just got to say, that makes me sick in my stomach. It just makes me, I'm not a violent man, but it just makes me want to just kick him in his throat. I mean, just with his hands in his pocket, arrogant, just like screw not only him, but all y'all black SOBs. Anybody up here taking pictures? I'm the king of the hill. I'm a man with a badge and all this kind of stuff. So it was never circulating in his head that he could end up in jail. Like, he felt completely justified in what he was doing.
He didn't care. He didn't care. And it's almost like the more people begged him to stop, the more emboldened he became. And the more he, wanted to do it. Like, who are you to tell me to stop killing this man? I'm going to show you who I am. Show you the power.
Put his hands in his pocket.
Yeah, that there is nothing about that that's a train. In fact, training teaches you the opposite. One thing that training always tells you to do is to protect the head, protect airways. We were taught so many times about asphyxiation, how to prevent it, not putting your weight on someone's back, protecting the cords of our artery. All of those things we were taught in the academy to how to protect and how to avoid. And a lot of the takedowns, no, don't get me wrong, taking someone down to the ground it's not pretty. It's not
right.
Decentralizing someone. It's not. If you record me taking somebody down, you're probably gonna get mad and say, "Oh, that officer, did this and did that," because it's not pretty. And there's no, However, even with that, officers are still taught to do things in a way. I can remember being in the academy to this day and saying, when you go down, you didn't grab the head to protect their head from going to the ground, and then you step back and you place your knee here and place it there. And so there's at least in the academy that I went through, and I'm sure all departments across the country teach these as well. There's just a lot of time spent on preventing. You heard the police chief for the one department, I believe it was Houston in Texas, that said, he came on and said that goes against our practices. And that will be true even for most departments, and including Minneapolis, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That is not a trained technique that is taught in the police academy. And the fact that he was doing it, it's just mind-blowing the way he was doing it, but the carelessness of it, is beyond me.
When you look at that as a person still in security and safety, but as a former cop, my guest last week, a former white, he's not former white, he's still white, but a white former cop said that the department, he talked about a toxicity, you called it a system, a culture. He says can make you cynical. But I don't believe a system can just make you, in your career, just make you hate Black people like that. So what are we not asking in interview panel that's allowing people that are just obvious racists and terrorists and hateful, arrogant people like that? How does that make it past a panel in someplace like Minneapolis? Are we not asking questions about people's interaction with other cultural groups? Like how are we missing that repeatedly?
And that's a really good question. I think that that's very difficult, and people are able to. I think for one, I think we hire too young. So I think anytime you hire individuals, they go to high school, they go to college, they take a degree, they become police officers, which I'm not knocking that. I'm just saying that makes it harder to really, people without life experience really gauge like what experiences they had in their life that has prepared them to deal with people who are not like them. That's why they tend to get more afraid, or they tend to. I teach I talk about in my talks the story of a situation where there's this state trooper Gruber, and there was a gentleman named LeVar Jones, where LeVar Jones was coming home from work. He went into a gas station to buy some snacks on his way home, and State Trooper Gruber stopped him for having a broken taillight. Long story short, State Trooper Gruber told, LeVar Jones got out of the car, and State Trooper Gruber greeted him. "How you doing, sir? Can you give me your driver's license?" And when LeVar went to get his driver's license, he reached in his car. Gruber feared for his life. And so he drew his gun, he said, "Freeze," and started firing and shot this man several times. Now he didn't die. But when they asked State Trooper Gruber why he did that, he said that he feared for his life. Now the question is how and why did he fear for his life? He just told somebody to get their driver's license, and they did exactly what he told them. Well, if State Trooper Gruber, if all he know about black men are the images that are shown on media, right, and we know they present, black men to be super predators and monsters and evil, and they make us out to be these villains. And there's history, there's statistics around how we are presented over years in the media. But if that's all State Trooper Gruber knew and understood of black men, and never had any other interaction with them than that, when he's in that moment, when that pressure is hitting him and he's trying to decide what he should do, he's going to reach into what I call his bag of life. And what do you think he's going to pull out? He's going to pull out those images and those ideas that he was embedded with for most of his life.
You're going to pull that out with one hand and his gun with the other hand.
And that's what he's going to respond to. So the chief of police in that situation said that State Trooper Gruber responded to a perceived threat where there was none. But in his mind, it was. It
was.
So, but he went to jail, and he ended up doing 5 years for that. And I think to get back to the question is, how do we get around that? Again, that's tough. That's a very difficult question, because they have all of these things in the police department, but I don't know. I don't recall being just flat out asked a question like, how much race relation training do you have, or how do you deal with other people? We're asked questions about diversity. What's your experience with diversity? But
nobody says none. Ain't nobody gonna come in there and lie and say none.
Exactly. How many of us can come up with a quick, smart, educated answer about diversity? I mean, we're all asked questions about diversity now. We all can spew out something real quick to kind of pass that sniff test. So, by having that real conversation, that real one-on-one with the person, and just and digging into their life, and everybody goes through background checks. Now, here's a good question though. That I'm gonna follow up with that question, so I can't provide the best answer. When they do your background check, they call your family members, your friends, your college roommates. So are those people being asked tough questions? Are those people has Johnny ever gotten into an argument over race with somebody? And then that would be the question. Now, I can't say that those people are or are not, but that's one way to better tighten up that whole
man. In light of what we're dealing with, we need to do something different, because this ain't working. Man.
I think another thing to do too, and I know we have people from the community on these hiring committees and promotion committees, but I think that could be done better as well. I think just getting so the oral boards, when people come to the oral board, it's like one of the final stages of the interview process before you hire. But we can have like 2 or 3 community members, and it doesn't have to be community leaders. I'm talking about just
regular citizens.
Exactly. People that just go to work, punch the clock, 9 to 5, come in, and you invite some of them on those hiring committees. They'll be able to sift and to see through that.
They can read stuff. They'll see it.
Yeah. Yeah. So more community involvement in the hiring process as well.
Man, just real quick, I know we're running out of time. Is it tougher to be a black cop today than it was 20 years ago?
That's a good question. I think it's very different. I think it's always been tough, though. I think it's always been tough. And I just think it's tough in different ways.
Does the black community, I know this is general, does the black community give black police officers a harder time today than they did 20, 25 years ago? And I mean good police, not ones, like from that Boys in the Hood scene, but like.
I think the black community is consistent. The black community don't like police, and that's just what it is.
They don't care what color you are.
Right, exactly. And I think they, will express. I mean, I've had people, family members now that they'll say that they love me, they don't like police, and I think the black community has been consistent in not liking police. But the black community is interesting because when I was a police officer, the black community would say things, they would make comments and everything, but you could tell that there was love there though. Like,
Yeah.
why you gotta be a police officer? Oh, but you my boy though. You know, whatever, however that was expressed. But then they might go to the next person, like, oh, fuck the police, you know, or something like that. And so I think the Black community overall has been consistent with their views toward police and not liking police. Whether it's hard to be a Black police officer now than 20 years ago, I think it's still hard. I just think it's hard in different ways. I told that story last time I was on your show, giving a white lady a citation because at first I wanted to give a warning, but she made a comment to me. After her, I'll just go briefly tell the story a little bit. You know, her dog ran down the street. I had to slam on brakes, and I just said, "Hey, maybe you should put the dog on a leash, you know, so that it's safe." You know, real nice.
Don't mess with white women with dogs not on leashes, man.
Yo, and then her response was like, you know, who are you to tell me what to do? I'll have your job. I'll get you fired. I'm going to call your job right now, and you don't have the right to tell me. And I'm like, well, actually, this is actually an actual violation of the city ordinance. So I can't tell you what to do. And she just went on and on and on. So I decided, well, I'll give you a ticket then. Since obviously I wanted to warn you, I wanted to be nice about it, but you know what a person is saying to you when they say, I'll have your job. You know, right. You know what she's saying. Like, she's saying, yeah, you're an officer, but you're Black. And so because of that, you don't have the authority to tell me anything. Now, that's fine. That's expected. Now, what was frustrating about that whole situation is that I actually got called into the office to talk to my supervisor about it. That's what made it frustrating, because now you're confirming everything that she said. And so that was the frustrating part. Like,
she was right. And if you had the wrong boss, he could have had your job.
I mean, pretty much. I mean, so that was the frustrating part. But so that's a part of policing, or of Black policing that gets me. You got
to still deal with racism inside the area like that.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you one more question. I've got folks that have agreed to be like my medical advisors. Dr. Jasmine Zapata has done that. Dr. Luther Gaston. Man, I would like you to be one of my like law enforcement advisors that will come on live once in a while when things happen, because you give such good insight. And part of that's because you've lived it and you're a trainer. So you spend time teaching people and training about these kinds of issues. It's ironic. Like, one of the last times you and I had a professional discussion was around active shooter training in churches. Now we're talking about protecting us from police officers.
Right.
When you think about that, you're trying to tell us how we keep people, strangers, supremacists, from coming in churches doing stuff. Now we got Black people getting shot in their rooms, their beds, wrong place, you standing by the curtain. I'm gonna put my hands and be in your neck. It's ironic that you and I are now talking about how to protect me from people with badges rather than the Dylan Roofs of the world.
It's sickening, actually.
It's sickening, man. You know, man, at some point, because I like talking, because there's more flexibility with former cops. And so last week I had a guy on named Chad, and Don, my producer, is going to drop that podcast also. I'd love to have you and Chad. Chad's a white gentleman in Minnesota, and Anthony. I'd love for us to have just a good conversation in the next couple of weeks about that. Because what's nice about doing this Zoom, that we don't have the distractions of everyone being in this page. We can just be like a panel, but people can put their comments in, and I'm getting them from Don. I don't know if I think he's sending those to me privately, but people have been asking questions the whole time, man. I mean, people have given us good engagement because of what you're saying. So just a couple of things before we wrap up, good people. Black Like Me podcast broke 3 records this week in downloads. 3 records. Monday, we had a really good record. We doubled that record on Tuesday. We doubled that record on Wednesday, which means that it was 4 times the previous record. And so we've seen like a 400% increase. So whoever's getting the word out there, white people that are trying to really understand what's going on, Asian, Latino folks that are trying to figure out what's going on, thank you. If you like what we're hearing, that we're doing this as a podcast and also as a live event, then my producer Don has put the link to Patreon on Facebook. Support a Black-led business. You want to do something? We tell people, allies educate, they donate, and they affiliate. And so educate, keep listening, donate, support us. You can do it as little as $2 a month, $6 a month. $6 will shout your name out. But affiliate, tell other people about it. If you like this episode, post it, retweet it, send a link to it, help people to understand. Send this to folks who you know are police officers or want to be police officers, because what this man has dropped is some really good knowledge. He put his life on the line for this community for 10 years, and then he has the ability to really speak back and say things that are very challenging, which you don't see very often. You do not see that piece very often. So please check out Black Like Me. We're in season 4, so you can backtrack and do a whole lot of things. You want to know what else you can do? You can write a review on iTunes or wherever you get it. You can go and review it. We've been focusing on patrons and we've been focusing on people subscribing, but I haven't told people to write a review in a long time. So come on, let's kick a brother up to the top notch. Let's put it up there so that we become one of those premier culture and society groups. So just go to iTunes, put in my name or Black Like Me, and just write a nice comment. If you're a white supremacist, don't go to my page and write nothing on there. But the other people, I got to throw a little joke in there. Other people do that. And also, when you go to Black Like Me, subscribe, because I'm also posting things that I'm writing and photos, and you get an update and a link that I've added new stuff. So subscribe to iTunes, and if you use an Android or an iPhone, your digital assistant will find it for you. If you say, Siri, find Black Like Me podcast, Siri will do that. So these are just some things you can do to stay connected. Again, my very special guest has been my friend for about 20 years, Corey Saffold. We're going to have to find a way to go celebrate your appointment to the Board of Regents. We talked about that a little bit when we were texting. I'm really proud about that. I worked on campus for years, and that is major. And I think we have to stop to celebrate stuff as well. Again, thanks to Taylor Fagan, who wrote that song, We Need More, that we showed a little earlier. You can Google him, We Need More by Taylor Fagins, Fagins. Brilliant musician out of Manhattan. It's only got 6,000 views. I think it needs 600,000. So put it up, share it. People who don't think this is real, send that to them and then say, now talk to me. Any parting words, Mr. Saffold, before we take off, sir?
Just thanks for having me. I love to have more of these conversations. I like answering the community's questions and giving some insight from the perspective of a police officer. So thanks for having me, and I look forward to coming back.
Man, definitely. All right, I'm going to go take a little break. I'm going to eat some pinto beans. We're coming back at 8:30. My guest for Black Like Me Live at 8:30 Central Standard Time is Dr. Sean Fletcher, and he is a professor of public relations at San Jose State in Northern California. And so that's going to be a great discussion. He and I are just going to talk about his role and exciting things he's doing in higher ed and how all of this is impacting the academy, not being in the classrooms, and how do you help students in a diverse place like a campus think about world leadership and where they're going and how's this impacting all of that. So you all be safe. Thank you for your questions. I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of them. Sherrod, DeBose, Anthony, all of you, thank you for those questions. We really, really do appreciate it, and we'll get to some of those next time. Have a good evening, be safe, and thank you for supporting Black Like Me.
Ooh, Black Like Me.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at www.alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.